Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I came back to the lake expecting peace. Instead, I found a fence, a warning sign, and no trace of my cabin. Just dirt, silence, and a cold knot in my gut. Someone had stolen my land, legally, quietly, and they thought I wouldn't fight back. They were dead wrong. I pulled off the gravel road and turned onto the rutted path that wound through the pine forest like a scar. The truck jolted and groaned under me as I crept forward, tires crunching over broken branches and loose stone. It was late afternoon, sunlight threading through the trees in long golden shafts, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of peace, the kind of peace I only ever found out here on the north side of Caldwell Lake. But the peace didn't last. About a quarter mile in, I spotted something that made my stomach pull tight. A fence. Not the kind of rustic split-rail barrier you put up to keep deer out of the garden. Number. This was a full-on 8-foot aluminum monstrosity, powder-coated white, with a gate flanked by 2 concrete posts, one of which had a polished sign bolted to it that read, "Private HOA access. Trespassers will be fined." I slammed the brakes. My tires skidded a little in the dirt. I sat there for a few seconds, blinking, not quite trusting what I was seeing. Then I threw the truck in park and got out. The air smelled like pine and mildew and fresh paint. That sign was new. So was the gravel they'd laid in front of the gate. I stepped closer, my boots sinking slightly. Beyond the gate, my land stretched down toward the water, or at least it should have. But now it looked wrong. Too empty. Where the hell was my dock? I climbed the fence. Took some effort. I'm 44 and still spry, but fences aren't my thing. My boots hit the ground on the other side with a soft thud. I scanned the clearing. My cabin was gone. Not burned, not collapsed, just gone. The slab foundation was still there, jagged at the edges where it had clearly been jackhammered. The ground was disturbed, scraped raw in wide arcs. Broken pieces of pressure-treated lumber lay stacked by a pine tree. The dock, the one I rebuilt myself over 2 winters, had been pulled up. The pilings were cut clean, the waterline muddy and bare. No tools, no trace of storage, no note, just a mess. And that damn sign. I stumbled forward, heat rising behind my ears. I walked the perimeter, past where the solar panels used to be, past the spot I'd cleared for the smokehouse I never got to build. Nothing. No gear. No tire tracks. Just that clean, methodical destruction, like someone had vacuumed my life right off the land. I pulled my phone out. Signal was weak but usable. I called the local sheriff's office, gave them the parcel number, described what happened. To their credit, a cruiser showed up within 30 minutes. 2 deputies, one older guy with a thick mustache and a younger one who looked like he still lived with his mom. I showed them the documents. Title deed, parcel map, property line certification. I keep it all backed up in cloud and in print. The older one nodded and walked the edge of the site with me. The younger one stayed back and made a few calls. When they regrouped, the mood had shifted. "So," the older deputy said, "we do have a letter here from the Lakewatch Vista HOA saying the land was turned over to them." I stared. "Excuse me." He held up a printed PDF in a clear sleeve. It was addressed to the county sheriff, dated 2 months ago, and stated that the lot, my lot, had been officially assigned to the HOA due to owner abandonment and non-participation in the revised Lakeshore Access Program. "What the hell is that?" I snapped. "I'm not in any HOA. I own this land outright. I pay taxes on it. There's no program. There's no abandonment. I was gone for 6 weeks. I had permits open and active for improvements." The younger deputy looked uncomfortable. "We're not saying you don't own it, sir. But this letter says the HOA assumed responsibility after the previous owner's forfeiture of interest. That's what we're seeing in the registry." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Previous owner? That man's been dead for 2 years. I bought the land from his estate. Escrow, notarized, fully processed. You can pull the transaction history." The older deputy handed me a card. "I believe you, Mr. Pryor. But until the county clarifies the chain of title, we're not authorized to take enforcement action. It's a civil matter. I didn't punch anything. I didn't yell. But I think they could tell I wanted to." I just stared at the spot where my house used to be. The bare dirt. The hollow ground. The invisible footprint of everything I'd built. They left 20 minutes later. I stayed behind. I sat on the edge of the ruined slab, dirt in my palms, and tried to find the edges of this thing. HOA jurisdiction, transfer without notice, sledge-hammered pier beams, that sign on the fence. Something told me this wasn't just a mistake. The next morning, I was at the county clerk's office before the receptionist had even unlocked the doors. I'd driven all night with one thought grinding behind my eyes. If someone forged a paper trail, I was going to find it. I've spent enough of my life sorting blueprints, grading land records, and triple-checking structural permits to know when something stinks. And this reeked. The clerk on duty, a sharp woman named Denise with coffee breath and zero patience, gave me that, "Oh no, one of those guys," look the moment I started talking. But I had all the parcel IDs, the recorded deed, the escrow reference, and full legal description from the sale. I just need to see the latest entry on Lot 14B, Caldwell Lake Shoreline, filed after January, I said, placing my documents on the counter like evidence in a murder trial. Denise clacked away on her keyboard, her lips pursed. She turned the monitor so I could see. There it was, a document filed 6 weeks ago, titled Statement of Intent to Abandon Property and Relinquish Ownership, signed, allegedly, and by Richard Kessler, the previous owner. My heart kicked. Kessler died 2 years ago. The signature on the form didn't match his from the escrow packet. The date of birth was right, but the handwriting was cleaner, artificial. The notary stamp, issued by Sandra Lynn, Deputy Registrar. I'd never heard the name, but a quick LinkedIn search on my phone showed she used to work for a small title firm in Branson. Guess who founded that firm? Russell B. Barton, the damn president of Lake Watch Vista HOA. I stepped back from the counter. I was shaking with something that wasn't quite anger. It was colder, calculated. "You need a copy?" Denise asked. She was watching me closely now. "I need 6, and notarized." An hour later, I was back in my truck, parked outside a cafe with internet, running name traces and pulling registry histories. I confirmed my worst suspicion. That forged document had triggered a transfer in the Lakefront Oversight Register, meaning HOA had piggybacked that paper into a real claim, enough to convince the local authorities they had jurisdiction. No challenge, no notice to me. They saw a window, and they dove through it. I called the son of the late owner, Marcus Kessler. He answered after the third ring, groggy and cautious. When I explained what had happened, there was silence, then disbelief, then a stunned, breathless, That's not possible. We never filed anything like that. That land was sold fair and square. You have the deed. I do. I confirmed. But apparently that doesn't matter when you're up against a forged claim buried in a county office. No one checks. He offered to sign a sworn affidavit. I accepted, but I knew affidavits weren't going to stop whatever this was. Because this wasn't just paperwork confusion, this was theft. I drove straight back to town and stopped at the office of Caldwell County Planning and Oversight, the same agency that handles shoreline development permissions. I wanted to see who requested demolition clearance for my parcel. After waiting 40 minutes in a beige lobby that smelled like mildew and regret, I was shown a digital request. Clearing of derelict structures, parcel 14B, abandoned/community reclamation program, approved by interim zoning liaison. I checked. The signature, Sandra Lynn. Again, that woman had a paper trail like a goddamn virus. Back at home, I flipped open my laptop and took a different tack. I started setting up a new Facebook profile. Fake name, stock photo, new email. I called her Tracy Gilmore. I made her a teacher from Kansas City looking to move closer to nature and start kayaking again. Once the account was up and running, I joined the Lake Watch Vista community group. Took 2 hours and a fake home address to get approved, but I got in. And Tracy, she was curious, polite, eager to learn. She asked all the right questions. Does the HOA manage the whole lake or just certain lots? What's the process for buying lakefront access? I saw some properties marked as reclaimed. Are those up for development? I didn't push too hard, just enough to get conversations going. They welcomed Tracy with suspicious warmth. HOA board members posted frequently, especially a guy named Glenn who seemed to be Barton's number 2. Glenn mentioned shared shoreline improvements and making the lake community safer by consolidating dead zones. Consolidating. That was their word for stealing. Tracy screenshot everything. By evening, I'd already logged 2 promising threads, one hinting at a recovery fund used to claim unoccupied lake parcels, and another joking that some folks didn't even know we got their land until the fence went up. That post had laughing emojis under it, the kind that make your blood boil. Back in the real world, I was printing my affidavit, preparing a certified mail packet for the county, and making a call to an old friend, James Tanner, civil rights lawyer turned bulldog property attorney. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I told him what had happened, there was no hesitation. "They forged a death man's signature and knocked down your home," he said. "Austin, I'm in. Get me copies. We'll start with a cease and desist, then we drag them through fire." I closed my laptop that night, exhausted but clear-headed. They wanted a quiet takeover. They got me instead. The cease and desist went out by priority mail the next morning. By noon, Tanner was already working on the paperwork for an emergency injunction, temporary restraining order to freeze any further development, sale, or modification of my land. While the legal gears started turning, I was still in the trenches, digging through the underbelly of this HOA hydra. 2 days later, I got a response from the Lake Watch Vista HOA. Not from Barton himself. No, that man wouldn't dare speak directly, but from their legal compliance team. It was a one-page PDF, passive-aggressively polite, stating that I had been in violation of shared shoreline integrity and that, according to Article 7, Section 4 of their bylaws, I owed $72,400 in community remediation and compliance fees. I laughed, out loud. In the middle of the post office, some poor guy at the next kiosk dropped his package. I sent the letter straight to Tanner, who was halfway between rage and amusement when he called me back. "They're actually invoicing you for the destruction they caused." "Like it's a damn hotel minibar," I muttered. "Break the door, charge the guest." We filed our response the same day. Formal objection, record of ownership, notice of pending litigation. But I knew how slow these things moved. HOA bureaucracies are built like tick nests, dense, ugly, and hard to kill. So I doubled down on my own offensive. Tracy, my digital decoy, was thriving. The HOA Facebook group had warmed to her. She liked their photos, commented on community gardening posts, and asked more questions about lake access. Glenn replied often. Barton never commented directly, but he liked posts that called for cleansing the lakefront from abuse and abandonment. Creepy language for a community board. One thread stood out. A resident posted about how her cousin had been pressured out of his lakeside mobile cabin because of zoning adjustments. Glenn responded, "We've had to be firm. Dead lots breed danger. Every empty property is a missed opportunity for safety and unity dead lots." That's what they were calling them. Like people's homes were corpses, like mine was. I screen captured it all. Meanwhile, I started reaching out to neighbors. Discreetly. Not on their turf. Some I already knew from past shoreline cleanups or fishing tournaments. A couple were cold, stiff. One closed the door on me before I said 10 words. But others, they talked. One woman, Valerie, said she and her husband left their old dock because of constant policy changes from the HOA. Another man, Caleb, swore someone had redrawn his property line overnight, and he had pictures to prove it. That made 3 of us. Tanner started compiling statements, building a dossier. Still, it wasn't enough. HOA wasn't just playing dirty, they were playing systemic. So I pivoted. I filed a formal complaint with the Missouri State Attorney General's office. I detailed the forged document, the destruction of my structure, the unauthorized seizure, and the fraudulent financial threat. Tanner helped me phrase it like a lawyer. I made sure it read like a crime scene. Then, I turned back to something I do know well, engineering oversight. I pulled the last survey map I had for the property, dated just over a year ago. Then I grabbed the adjusted boundary map now showing up in the county records. There was a difference, a deliberate one. My property line had been subtly shifted by about 30 feet toward the interior, removing the dock and half my build site from my parcel and nudging it into a limbo zone, unregistered, undefined, and apparently available for administrative reclamation. They carved off a piece of my land and sent it into purgatory. Digitally, I went back to Denise at the clerk's office, showed her both maps side by side. She looked nervous. "I'm not supposed to comment on changes made by external compliance teams," she said. What's an external compliance team? Third-party zoning analysts. Usually approved by County Development Review. Its standard was Russell Barton's name on the approval docket. She didn't answer, but her eyes did. And that was enough. Back home, I booted up Tracy again. She asked Glenn if there were any future lots for sale on the water. He replied within minutes, "We're finalizing a few adjustments. Some reclaimed shoreline plots may become available in Q3. Pricing will be available for HOA members in good standing reclaimed shoreline plots." My plot. I didn't scream. I didn't punch anything. I started downloading every conversation, every change log from the county GIS database, and began building a timeline. My land hadn't been taken in a blind bureaucratic accident. It had been surgically removed, plotted, justified, monetized, and dressed in legal language. The only thing they didn't count on? Me watching. 2 weeks into the fight, I stopped playing defense. The court had accepted our emergency injunction. No one was allowed to touch the property, build on it, fence it, or file further claims until the matter was resolved. It was a small win, a speed bump on a runaway train, but it gave me just enough time to load my rifle, metaphorically speaking. Tanner was working his angle through the courts. I was working mine through the shadows. I started with a tip from one of the residents I'd spoken to, a guy named Nate, who used to be on the HOA finance committee before he quit in disgust. Over beers in his garage, Nate told me that Lakewatch Vista had taken out 2 private infrastructure loans in the past year to finance shoreline beautification. He called it beauty for the brochure, but they were bad loans, high interest, strange terms, and rumored to be under-collateralized. That meant one thing: leverage. The next morning, I made calls. Not as Austin Pryor, that would spook them. I used a quiet LLC I'd formed years ago to flip a stone house in Arkansas. I called it Redwood Basin Holdings now. My lawyer friend from a different life helped me navigate the purchase of HOA debt instruments from the secondary market. Small bundles first. Nothing flashy, just enough to peek under the hood. 2 weeks later, I legally owned a controlling interest in HOA's shoreland improvement debt. They didn't know yet, but they would. I pulled the trigger through a formal letter sent by Redwood Basin's counsel to Lakewatch Vista. Early repayment demand due to risk reassessment. Total owed $482,000, due in 30 calendar days. If not paid, the terms granted Redwood the right to initiate claim against secured communal assets, including shoreline upgrades, fences, and any HOA-managed parcels. I didn't just knock on the front door. I firebombed their mortgage from orbit. While the letter went out, Tracy, my ever-curious digital identity, started asking louder questions in the Facebook group. Has anyone heard about refinancing for Phase 2 of shoreline improvements? I read something about debt restructuring in the HOA minutes. Is that normal? The panic was almost immediate. Glenn posted a long defensive comment blaming external financial predators. Barton, for the first time, posted directly, vague, dismissive, but clearly shaken. The HOA stopped commenting altogether the next day. The group went quiet. Then came the retaliation. 3 days later, I returned to the lake to check my trail cams. They were gone. Not vandalized, just missing. Metal mounts unscrewed, wires clipped clean. I checked the drone feed from 2 nights prior. The motion alerts were real. A black SUV had pulled up just after midnight. 3 men in security uniforms, no badges, moved in and out of my parcel for over an hour. One of them carried bolt cutters. Another dumped something near the slab where my house used to stand. Then they left. No headlights. The next morning, I went to check the spot. They'd left behind the remains of a fire, burned scrap wood, nails, melted plastic, and scorched insulation foam. They were destroying evidence. I bagged what I could, took photos, filed a police report, and then drove straight to Tanner's office. "This is arson," he said. "Not if they say it was cleanup. Then we say it was obstruction of justice." We updated the AG's complaint, added video stills, GPS tags, time-stamped drone footage. It wasn't just theft anymore, it was a conspiracy. Coordinated action, destruction of private evidence during litigation. Meanwhile, I got a call from an unlisted number. A woman's voice. Soft. Clipped. "I have something you'll want," she said. From inside. Her name was Danielle, a former HOA admin who quit after Barton allegedly forced her to notarize a set of boundary change forms with no property owner present. She'd kept copies. She also had a flash drive labeled HOA_capital_trust_backup. I met her in the parking lot of a Baptist church just outside town. She handed me the drive and a manila folder. "I never saw you," she said, and drove off. Back home, I plugged in the drive and found exactly what I'd hoped for, and more than I'd feared. A folder marked Russell Only. Inside, PDF scans of abandonment forms for 7 different properties, all signed in identical handwriting. A spreadsheet titled Aggressive Compliance Strategy, Q2 to Q4, with parcel numbers, projected reclaim dates, and pressure tactics. Emails between Barton and County Zoning liaisons marked personal and do not forward. Payment logs showing under-the-table site cleanup invoices to Barton's nephew's company. The same name on the black SUV. It was. The smoking gun, the bloody knife, and the signed confession rolled into one. I sat back in my chair, watching the drone footage loop silently on one screen while reading Barton's emails on another. I wasn't just a landowner anymore. I was the executioner. Tanner took one look at the flash drive and said, "This isn't just a nail in their coffin. This is the goddamn mausoleum we burned multiple encrypted copies and uploaded one to a secured archive." Then we drafted a full exhibit packet for both the Missouri Attorney General's office and the U.S. District Court for Western Missouri. 2 days later, I received confirmation that the AG had opened a formal investigation into Lakewatch Vista HOA for fraudulent property claims, zoning manipulation, forgery, and civil rights violations. That same day, a federal investigator requested access to the original footage from my drone. I didn't just hand it over, I uploaded a compilation with timestamps, cross-referenced GPS logs, and a full breakdown of every face caught in frame. The man with the bolt cutters? Tanner traced him to a private security firm owned by Barton's cousin. They weren't just neighbors trying to enforce community guidelines. This was a syndicate in a cardigan. While the legal machine revved up, I kept pushing through other channels. Redwood Basin Holdings, the shell company I controlled, submitted a petition to the county board citing HOA's debt default and requested a creditor-initiated audit of all association-owned assets. That audit, once approved, would allow us to seize or freeze any community-maintained structures tied to the shoreline reclamation plan, including, theoretically, the very fence they built on my land. It wasn't just personal anymore. Then, the HOA broke their silence. A sudden post appeared on the Lakewatch Facebook group, not from Glenn, not from a board member, but from an anonymous profile with a tree logo as the picture. It simply said, "There are people working to undermine our community. We will respond accordingly." A threat? A bluff? Either way, Tracy liked the post. I doubled down. Using my leverage as primary creditor, I issued a formal demand for a financial hearing. That forced the HOA to open their books. And when they tried to stall, I filed for a judicial enforcement clause already baked into the loan terms. They were trapped in their own contract. Barton had signed it personally as board guarantor. Idiot. Behind the scenes, the Tracy persona wasn't just gathering info now. She was provoking. I started pushing subtle questions in DMs. Things like, if the reclaimed lots go up for sale, do we bid through the board directly? Would it be weird if someone investigated the parcel transfer process? Glenn responded with an uncharacteristic wall of text. You don't understand the politics involved. These lots were already wasted. We brought them back. Legally. Cleanly. You want to live here? You stay quiet. This isn't a charity screenshot. Saved. The next escalation didn't come through Facebook or email. It came through an old-fashioned certified letter addressed to Redwood Basin Holdings. It was hand-delivered by a courier with no uniform and no ID. Inside, a single page, unsigned. Drop the audit, cancel the payment demand, walk away. Final notice, no return address, no name. But the watermark in the corner was from Vista Legal Services, the HOA's own law firm. I handed it straight to Tanner. This is witness intimidation, he said flatly. And stupid as hell. We submitted it to the AG's office with a formal notice. I made another backup. Then I decided it was time to go public. Through a buddy of mine who used to work in local news, I got in touch with an investigative journalist from the Springfield Tribune, the kind who eats scandal for breakfast. I gave her access to selected materials. Nothing sensitive yet, but enough to show the outlines. False claims, illegal seizure, forged documents, weaponized zoning. She called me the next day. This is bigger than an HOA story. This is organized fraud. I smiled. Wait until you meet Tracy. Meanwhile, I took one last step. I bought a discreet but powerful wireless surveillance system and installed it along the edge of the property, just beyond the reach of the fence. Battery-powered, motion-triggered, connected to cloud storage in a server in Oregon. If they came back to erase anything else, I'd have it on video before they made it to the second fence post. I didn't sleep much that week. Between court motions, Tracy's digital persona, and the audit countdown, I was juggling grenades. But I wasn't afraid anymore. They'd set the trap thinking I was just some recluse with a cabin. They didn't know I'd spent my career designing pressure systems, and I'd just put them in one. The courtroom smelled like industrial carpet and stress. A low buzz echoed as attorneys shuffled papers and adjusted ties, but I sat still, focused, calm. It was my third time in the building that month, and by now I knew exactly where the power outlets were, which bailiff had a bad back, and how many times the court reporter liked to recenter her mic. What I didn't know, until that day, was just how many people had been hurt by Barton's operation. Tanner leaned over and whispered, 5 new affidavits. One of them submitted photographs. Of what? Her trailer being cut in half by a contractor. They said she was past deadline to vacate. The judge called the hearing to order. It was a preliminary motion session for our audit demand, the financial hearing forced by the defaulted loan. But Lake Watch Vista didn't show up in full. Only Glenn, looking haggard and defensive, and a local lawyer I didn't recognize. No Barton. Not even a phone-in. The judge didn't like that. After reviewing the documents, she ruled that the audit would proceed under creditor authority, which meant Redwood Basin Holdings, me, was now authorized to appoint a neutral auditor to inspect HOA's finances, assets, liens, and property control claims. Translation, I just got the keys to their skeleton closet. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A call from Valerie, the woman I'd met weeks ago who said her husband gave up their dock because of policy changes. She sounded breathless. I didn't know who else to tell, she said. I got a letter from the county saying we voluntarily transferred shoreline rights. But we never signed anything. I checked the signature. It's not ours. I froze. Was it notarized? Yes, by someone named Sandra Lynn. Of course it was. I told her to meet me at Tanner's office the next day. When she arrived, she brought not just her letter, she brought 2 other neighbors. One had lost lakefront access last year due to erosion remediation, but never got proof. The other had received a bill from the HOA charging him $58,000 for illegal mooring. Within 48 hours, we had 6 property owners, all with similar stories: fake transfers, unexplained rezonings, threats, and intimidation. A few had moved away, assuming they had no legal recourse. Others stayed silent out of fear. But now they were furious. Tanner and I organized a meeting at a VFW hall just outside city limits. I paid for the rental in cash. We printed packets, copies of affidavits, satellite images, timelines. The room wasn't full, but it was heavy, the kind of quiet that happens when people realize they've all been lied to the same way. I presented what I had: the forged signatures, the ghost rezoning, the fake shoreline initiative, the debt trap. I laid out the audio files from Danielle's flash drive. I showed Glenn's smug posts from Facebook. I even showed them the contractor registry proving Barton funneled money to family firms. At the end, I said one thing: we're not victims. We're plaintiffs. Tanner began collecting signed agreements right there. He explained the process. A class action civil suit with all named parties contributing individual evidence toward the greater claim: fraud, trespass, forgery, emotional distress, property destruction, financial exploitation, the works. Within a week, 14 people signed on. We filed the class action in federal court, and that's when Barton made his move. I was in town, walking out of the hardware store, when a man I didn't recognize, 6 feet tall, blue polo, mirrored sunglasses, stepped into my path. "You think you're clever," he said, "but you don't know who you're dealing with." I smiled. "Actually, I do. And the FBI does too." He hesitated just for a moment, then walked away. I got his plates. Later that day, I sent the footage to my contact at the Tribune. She called back that night, voice giddy with adrenaline. "The piece is going live tomorrow," she said. "Front page. We're naming names." I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor reflecting off Tracy's open chat window. Someone had messaged her anonymously. "You're asking too many questions." Tracy replied, then give me a reason to stop. The courthouse was packed. Reporters, local residents, even off-duty county workers packed the benches and lined the back walls like it was a damn football game. Word had spread. The Springfield Tribune had followed through. Their headline read, Homeowner Association or Land Theft Syndicate. Inside, the Lake Watch Vista conspiracy beneath it. Full-color photos of Barton, Danielle's notarized forms, a still from my drone footage showing 3 men torching the remains of my foundation, and a bright red excerpt from an internal HOA email. Some of these people don't even realize they've forfeited their rights. Let's keep it that way. No one was smiling in that courtroom, except Tanner. He opened with a quiet, devastating summary. Forged documents, falsified zoning requests, destruction of private property, surveillance footage, financial pressure schemes, and witness intimidation. Then he dropped the flash drive. Literally. It clattered onto the table with the gravity of a weapon, because that's what it was. Proof of deliberate, systemic, coordinated fraud. Opposing counsel didn't even try to deny the forms. They squirmed, dodged, tried to throw the notary under the bus, but the judge wasn't buying any of it. She called it a clear abuse of administrative mechanisms for unlawful enrichment. And when the FBI representative took the stand, it was over. He testified that Barton had coordinated shoreline reclamation plans as a cover for land grabs, with kickbacks from subcontractors and unauthorized use of GIS systems to shift parcel boundaries. Emails between Barton and his cousin, the one with the private security firm, outlined compliance sweeps, soft eviction strategies, and evidence removal timetables. It wasn't just HOA corruption, it was racketeering. Then came the witnesses. Valerie spoke, voice trembling. Nate brought up old HOA meeting recordings where Barton bragged about cleansing the lakefront. Danielle broke down as she described being pressured into notarizing documents under threat of losing her job. And then it was my turn. I stood, told them everything, from the moment I turned down that dirt road to the second I saw my dock missing. The fake letters, the fake invoices. The nightmen came to burn what was left of my home. Tanner showed the drone footage on the screen. You could hear people gasp when the flames lit up. When one of the men walked back toward the SUV, the camera zoomed just enough to show his face. It was Barton's nephew. Game set. Fire. The ruling was swift. The judge declared Lakewatch Vista HOA an illegitimate and criminally compromised organization. She ordered an immediate freeze of all HOA bank accounts, assets, and board operations. All claims of property reclamation made in the last 4 years were declared null and void. My land, and that of every other plaintiff, was restored, with legal protections from further interference. Then came the criminal referrals. Barton was arrested right there in the hallway, in a suit 2 sizes too tight, sweating like he knew it was coming. The charges were stacked high. Fraud, conspiracy, property destruction, mail fraud, false notarization, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. He tried to say it was a misunderstanding. No one listened. The prosecutor recommended the maximum. 18 years. The courtroom didn't cheer, but I saw nods, tears. Quiet, vindicated rage finally allowed to exhale. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Journalists, other HOA victims from around the state, even a law professor who wanted to include the case in her curriculum. Tracy Gilmore, for her part, retired gracefully, but not before I posted a farewell message. Thanks for letting me into your wonderful community. I've learned so much about how you treat your neighbors. It went viral in under an hour. The Lakewatch Facebook group shut down the next day. I came back to Caldwell Lake in late October. The leaves had started to turn. Yellow maples, red oaks, copper bronze sycamores fluttering along the shoreline like embers in slow motion. The air smelled like cold water and old pine bark. It was the kind of stillness that settles after a long storm, and this time it was mine again. My land had been officially reinstated, deed verified, all claims scrubbed, flagged as immune to community claims. Under a rare protective clause the judge added herself. Tanner called it judicial salt in the wound. The fence was gone. The posts pulled. The ground still bore the scars of what they did, but the land felt alive again, like it had exhaled. The slab where my old cabin stood had been declared compromised. Fine by me. I wasn't rebuilding what they destroyed. I was building something bigger, stronger. I broke ground on a new foundation that same week. 40% larger footprint, stone reinforced piers, an observation deck facing west, straight across the lake. This wasn't just a retreat anymore, it was a fortress. The dock came next, this time with double-thick piling sleeves and locking brackets. I paid a local crew, not for speed, but for precision. I wanted every bolt to remember it was placed by a man who'd fought for every inch of this shoreline. Some of the other plaintiffs visited during construction. Valerie brought lemon bars and cried on the new deck. Caleb brought beer. One guy, Larry, brought a framed copy of the headline from the Tribune story and offered to help with wiring. People healed faster when they healed together. The HOA, of course, was gone. Officially dissolved by state order, its remaining funds redistributed as court-ordered reparations to victims. Barton was serving time. Glenn took a plea deal, turned over emails, and fled the county. The county board fired 3 zoning officials. 2 more resigned for personal reasons. The lake had been quiet ever since. I heard whispers that other HOAs were getting nervous, cleaning up records, double-checking boundaries, making calls to lawyers. Some even reached out to Tanner for audits of their own. The dominoes had started to fall. As for me, I planted a dogwood tree near the old burn scar, not for symbolism, for shade. But I did hang one thing, right at the edge of the new gate facing the road. I had it carved in iron and sunk into a solid oak slab, mounted in concrete. Private property, not HOA. This land was stolen once, never again. People slow down when they see it. Some stop, some take photos. I let them. They don't know what it cost to plant that sign, but I do. Every letter, and I'll never forget.